Welcome to Scrunchy Time. I'm Nicole Hegstead, your fertility advocate. After 6 years of infertility and 3 miscarriages, I decided that I needed to become the advocate for my own body. If you're exhausted from struggling to get pregnant and want to know more about how I can help, check out my website at www.nicolehegstead.com.
And I'm Bridget May, your children's health expert. My son was born with a heart condition that led to 3 open heart surgeries, cath labs, a tracheostomy, and a ventilator. After being fed up with mixed opinions, I became my children's own advocate. If your child's health is lacking, then check out my website at www.bridgetmay.com to find out more how I can help. Put your hair up and pay attention while we discuss today's hottest topics concerning female hormones and healthy kiddos.
We aren't silky.
We aren't crunchy. We're scrunchy. Hi, and welcome back to Scrunchy Time. This is episode 5. How exciting. Oh my gosh, this is actually really cool. So we're 1 month in, over 1 month.
Ow.
I know, right?
Crazy.
It's crazy. So today we want to talk about boundaries and how that affects our life. And well, I'll let you talk about it, Nicole, because you're going to explain all of that. So why don't you take it away?
Okay. So first, I want to talk about what a boundary is. So a boundary is like a rule or like a fence, right? If you think about your property line, what is the boundary line, the fence, that kind of thing. It's what separates you from me. So some common boundaries that we have in our society are adults don't touch other adults without permission or really, really knowing them well. You don't hit somebody. You don't try to kill somebody. That's a boundary. Like, you can, and people do, but they usually go to jail or get in trouble for it. It's things that we get in trouble for. Steal somebody else's property. Like, those are all rules. Those are all boundaries that separate you from everyone else. And you don't do those things to everyone else without expecting a repercussion of some kind. So that's kind of a societal, is that what a word? It's a boundary. Is it? Okay. It's a boundary in our society that everyone recognizes as being true. Another good one: you don't have adultery outside of your marriage, and not expect a divorce. Like, these are all good things. But a boundary in your personal life could be, we're going to see your mother once a week instead of every single day, or people aren't allowed to come up and touch my children in the mall. We were talking just before this about people who like to touch your kids. Random things like that make you feel uncomfortable, that you have the right to say, hey, you don't have the right to do this to me, and I have the right to make this rule for my life. And maybe it's not a rule that you would make for everyone. Maybe you'd rather you're fine with seeing your sister-in-law every single day, but you don't want to see your mother-in-law every single day. And so these are rules that we make up to make our life more comfortable, more inhabitable, and less stressful. So
Keeping it sane.
Yes, keeping us sane. Exactly. So that's what a boundary is. And boundaries apply differently to each and every topic. So when it comes to finances, a boundary might be something like, well, we're going to create a budget and stick to it. Or we're not going to eat out for this month. Or we get X amount of dollars in fund money, and that's it. Everything else goes to bills and then savings. You might have toxic people in your life where you're like, well, we're going to limit their amount of interaction with us, or we're not going to see them or talk to them ever again. So it kind of is all different. It's all, however the boundary applies depends on the topic. And so that can be a rule between you and your husband. It can be a rule that you need to let people know about. It can be a rule that you don't ever tell somebody about. You just stop talking to them. It can be any of those things. And when you know you need a boundary is usually when you're stressed or have anxiety or fear about a certain situation. So if you're super, super stressed about, let's say, Christmas, because the holidays just passed, like, I'm sure you can all relate to Christmas. I love talking about Christmas stress, especially around the holidays, because everyone understands what you're talking about. The rest of the year, it's like, man, I'll worry about that in December. But when you're in December and January, you either know what I'm talking about or you're coming off of knowing what I'm talking about. And so it's awesome. But so if we talk about Christmas, if you're super stressed about going home for Christmas, and you start looking at why you're stressed. That can be because you don't have money to pay for the trip to get there. It could be because you don't have money to buy gifts for the people that are going to be there. Or it could be because you have that one uncle that talks about that one topic that you just cannot stand. And he's really weird that way, and he just won't stop talking about it, right? So you can create boundaries around all of those. You can not go to Christmas because you just don't have the money to go. You can just give Christmas cards instead, or make gifts because you don't have the money to buy gifts. Or you can tell your uncle, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about that with you this year. If you want to talk about anything else, we totally can. But I'm not going to talk about that with you. Or you can say, I'm not going to go if Uncle Eddie is going to be there. Just flat out. If he's going to be there, I'm not coming. So, I mean, it really depends on how many waves you want to make, how important it is to you. But I will say this, if you recognize that it is something that you need to create a boundary for, and you refuse to create the boundary, then it's kind of something you have to live with, because you can't recognize that, well, it's this uncle and I need to never see him again or never talk to him about this again, but I'm not going to do anything about it because I don't want to cause waves and I'd rather talk to my family, but then I'm going to complain about it for 11 months out of the year. It doesn't work like that. And that's making a mess of your own life when you're that focused on it. And so it's one of those things where if you recognize that it's not worth making a boundary over, then you kind of need to move on and let it go. And because the stress is going to cause you more problems than it's worth to continue stressing about it. And so the point of boundaries is to take what you're stressed or anxious about and say, this is the new rule. And then the stress and anxiety is gone. But to admit, okay, I need to make a boundary, but I don't want to make a boundary because I don't want to deal with the repercussions of that boundary, then you're still going to have the stress. And you either need to say, well, Uncle Eddie is just odd and he's just going to talk about that and that's just something we need to deal with, or avoid him, while we're there, but I don't want to deal with it, then just let it go. And then recognize too that there will be fallout from boundaries. So fallout from financial boundaries could mean you don't get to go to the beach this year because you're saving money. Fallout could be if you cut people out of your life, they get really, really angry and other people don't understand why you're cutting them out of their life. And people are just super confused and it's like this big, huge bloodbath of emotional feelings. And that might be okay. It just depends on the situation that you're dealing with. And so you really have to look at the specific situation and say, what am I worth? What is worth dealing with here? And I am worth more than sitting around and stressing over this situation and the way that my parents treat me or the way that my finances are. I am worth more than living paycheck to paycheck. I am worth more than my mother-in-law treating me this way. I am worth more than my kids acting like insane savages when I go out of the house, right? Like, you are worth more than that. And so you have the right to make a boundary to protect yourself in each of those situations. And that can be, like I said, anything from disciplining the children to cutting people out of your life to creating budgets, et cetera, et cetera. And that can apply to work, personal life, friends, church, clubs, you name it. It applies to everything. It applies to all of life. You have the right to make rules for your life. And we kind of have a society right now that has this opinion that you don't have the right to decide these things. Like you don't have the right to tell me I can't be in your life. You don't have the right, to quit this job. Or if you do, you're a really bad person. When I quit my last job, I was given a card that literally said, remember that the road you're on leads you right back here. I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm quitting a job, like it'd be one thing if I was moving out of the house. Like if you're moving out of your parents' house, that'd be a cute card for that, right? But you're quitting a job and they're basically telling you, oh, you'll be back. Like, what are you talking about? Like, talk about a boundary problem. Like, they could not be told I'm leaving. And so we have this idea that boundaries are not allowed and we don't have the right to enforce these things. And so then we feel guilty. And then everybody else is skewed on their boundaries. And so then they start telling you, well, you shouldn't have done that. Well, that was wrong on your part. and all of these things. And so there will be fallout from you creating boundaries. There will be people who don't understand. There will be friends lost or family members where relationships are ruined. But again, you have to weigh whether that is more important, whether those relationships are more important, or whether your sanity is more important. And that's where you put it on the scale, and you have to decide for yourself what is more important in this situation. And that's really up to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you have to choose the boundary over the friendship. It's what you would rather have. Would you rather have peace of mind or a friend that drives you insane? And so it's going to be on that scale. It's going to be completely up to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That was a great explanation. So I loved your analogies and everything. So
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Like, all I could think about, like, while you were saying that, is just like, if we live in complete and total chaos with no rules, basically, like everybody's just dealing and stressed, and it's just chaos because there is no rhyme or reason to it. And we don't know how the other person's going to react or not react because they haven't set what their standards are for whatever's going on. So
a really good example is I had a friend who told me that they were going to be doing something at their wedding. And I told them that we were really close. Okay. So I felt like I had the right to say this, but I told them, if you do that, I will not be coming to your wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to know that up front. And they said, I have the right. I'm the bride. I have the right to do whatever I want at my wedding. And I said, absolutely, 100%. You have that right. But you do not have the right to tell me that I have to come because you're choosing whatever you want to do. I have the right to stay home, and you are not free from the consequences of the decision just because you have the right. We all have the right to eat crap all day. But we are not free from the consequences of eating garbage. We still have to pay the consequences of that. It is a universal law that, yes, we live in America, you have the right, but there are going to be consequences to each of your decisions. And so some of those consequences are going to be boundaries that you have to put up to protect yourself. And some of those consequences are consequences to your boundaries. Yep. So, but I love that analogy of when I was talking to this person, and that was at the beginning of my understanding of boundaries. And she was ranting and raving. I was like, she's right. She totally has this right. And this is what I've been practicing in my own life. And then I was like, wait, but I have a right not to have to go. Like that's my right as well. Like we all have these rights. And if that means we can't be friends, then that means we can't be friends, So yeah.
If she viewed whatever she wanted to do at the wedding more important than you being there, then that was her choice. You Absolutely. Made it very clear what your standards are, and yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So what would you say, like how does that then affect us? Like, so say we do put these boundaries in place, like what you've talked a lot about, like the consequences of it, like, total chaos, confusion, lost relationships, crazy finances, all of that can happen without having boundaries. What happens when we put these boundaries in place, and like the benefits of seeing all of that?
Yeah. So in the beginning, you usually don't. That's what's actually really hard about boundaries, is because like immediately after like telling someone can't be your friend anymore if you're going to act this way, like you lost a friend and you can't call that person anymore. And it's like, oh my goodness, like how is this better for me? But as time goes on, you get this amazing amount of peace in your life, and it's crazy, and it like accumulates, and it to the point where like a year later, I had to set some really strong boundaries with some people about a year ago now. And I look at myself today, and for the first 3 to 4 months after that, it was horrible. I hated my life. I was like, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? Like, really want those people back in my life. And this is awful. And I'm going to what is the point of living if this is the rest of my life? And now I look back over the course of the last year, and I see that I'm in a place that I never would have been in if I had remained with these people. Like 25 years from now, I would never have gotten the growth that I've gotten in the last year. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to look different for everything. Like Like if it is a financial thing with budgeting, you know, you're going to have the immediate hardship of, well, there's not money to go out to eat tonight, honey. We got to make tomato soup at home. And so that really sucks, you know, and there's going to be a lot of nights with tomato soup. But in a year from now, when you've got $10,000 in savings and you can go do whatever you want for Christmas vacation or whatever you're saving that money for, that's the blessing of that. And that peace of mind that comes with extra money or no drama in your life. And so it just kind of, it accumulates slowly. And I would say peace and calm are the best, but then confidence is the next thing that comes when you start to recognize this is my life and these are my decisions and I can make this decision. And then you enforce that and you go through that hardship of dealing with the grieving of that loss and all of that. And then you see the peace on the other side. You start to get way more confident to then where people start treating you poorly and you're like, no, you can't do that to me, you know? And it's just like, you don't even feel bad about it at that point. It's kind of to the point now where I'm just like, boundary, nope, you're not allowed there. You know, like you can't do that to me. And your confidence level just goes through the roof. Like it's amazing. I actually have looked back at several relationships and wondered if I'd had better boundaries back then, would I still be friends with them? Or would it have ended the relationship twice as fast as what it did? One or the other would have happened and it wouldn't have been this long drawn out thing, you know? And so it really, I would say peace is first, and then second would be confidence to be able to really say no and continue going on in your life.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. I had another question for you, and right as you were coming to an end, I was like, oh, what was that question? Yeah. Oh, do you feel, okay, so you put all these boundaries in place, you tell people, you know, you were going out with friends, you know, 3 times a week, having fun, you know, going out to dinner or whatever, or, you know, whatever, and you make these boundaries for, you know, you want to have date night now every night, once a week. So that's going to take up one of those nights. You know, financial, you want to cut back, whatever. Do you find that you all of a sudden become very rude to people because of, you know, putting these in place, and like that affects people? Or do you find that people actually respect you for stepping up for yourself?
I will answer that twofold. It depends on the relationship. If the relationship is toxic, then they're going to get mad and they're going to be rude back. And you might have to be rude to defend yourself. But if the relationship is a good relationship, they will understand. And that's where it gets really interesting, where there have been times where I have set boundaries and then the way people reacted to those boundaries made me not want to be their friends anymore. Like, you can't even respect that about me. That was such a little thing that I asked of you. An example, I had a really negative situation at work, and I've always had a rule that I'm not friends with coworkers, and I had broken that rule. And so I was friends with everyone at this job, and this one person just started being super negative, and it was a horrible experience at work. And so I wanted to unfriend them on Facebook, but I didn't want it to exasperate the problem by unfriending that one person. And I was like, I'm just going back to my rule where I'm not friends with anyone on Facebook. And that one act actually damaged several relationships at work, several more relationships. And I realized, okay, if you can't understand that this wasn't about you to begin with, and it was about somebody else, and I just needed you to take the fall as well, like just nobody, then I don't want to be your friend either. Like, if that something that small is going to make you that mad, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal, you know? And so, so if it's a toxic relationship like that, then yes, it could damage your relationship. It could make things sticky. It could make things, all of that. But if it's a good relationship, they should be like, hey, I totally get it. You know, like, not a big deal. Like, I love hanging out with you, but I'm not offended, because they should have enough confidence in themselves to understand this isn't about me not wanting to hang out with you. This is about, I don't have the resources to do so. And that's all there is to it. You know, if I had unlimited amount of time and unlimited amount of money, I'd get together with all of my friends every single day. But unfortunately, none of us have that, right? Some of us have to go to work at some point. Some of us have to watch TV at some point. So like we can't do that. And so it's just one of those things where if they're a good friend, they're going to understand. And maybe that's something where you'll start to understand, wow, that's not really a good friend, or that really is a good friend. And that's part of this process too. When you haven't had strong boundaries, and you've allowed all of these toxic people into your life, and you start setting these boundaries with people, like as time goes by, you start to discover like, oh, that person is kind of toxic too. And oh, that person's kind of toxic too. And like I said, this has been a 2-year long process for me. And I can honestly say at this point, I'm surrounded by people who would understand if I said, I can't hang out with you that day. And I wasn't a year ago at all. And so it is one of those amazing things where you'll find that out as you go. And if even thinking about it, if you're like, I got to tell this person and they're going to be really, really angry, then you need to think about that concept too. Like if you're scared to tell someone, I have another rule for myself. If I think about quitting a job and I think I can't quit this job, I have to have this job, I have to quit that job. I was looking for a job and I found this job. There is no job in America that is so good for us average people right now. I'm not talking about if you have an amazing career where you're making $100,000 or more a year, then this does not apply to you. But if you're like a normal person and you're making less than $70,000 a year, you can get that anywhere. You can get that job anywhere. And like, we're all in the same boat. So there's no job that is so important that you need to put up with. And I have found where I find toxicity in my work life is if I start thinking, if I quit this job, I'm going to go bankrupt and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills and everything's going to fall apart. And then I have to keep this job and I have to stay here because if I don't, everything will fall apart. That's when the job has become toxic, because I'm no longer there because I want to be. I'm there because I feel stuck. And so if you're feeling fear about setting a boundary, you need to really reevaluate that and look at whatever that boundary is and say, but would it be so bad? Start sending out job applications. Stop seeing that friend, whatever you need to do to get out of that situation.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. How would you say making boundaries and lowering that stress and anxiety and fear and everything on you affects your fertility and your hormones?
Oh, exponentially. Stress throws a lot of your hormones off. And it does that because cortisol plugs up the receptor sites that the other hormones like progesterone gets into. And so a lot of women with things like PCOS or low progesterone, it's the high cortisol that is the problem usually with that. And then your body gets burnt out and then you swing into a low cortisol problem, and it's this seesaw back and forth. And I talk about that a lot with my clients. So if you have feelings of like depression or burnout, or you're rushing from one task to the next, or you feel stuck in any of these situations that we've talked about, I go over all of that with my clients. And it's something that you definitely probably have a problem with. And if you're struggling to get pregnant, it probably is the biggest issue as to why. And so that is something I can help you through. And it's the first thing I tackle with most of my clients. Not all of them, but most of my clients. I look at their life and it's like, okay, let's start here. So boundaries are
because there's boundaries in like self-care and stuff too, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And creating, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And creating self-care, like a self-care routine, and saying, okay, I get an hour to myself every single day, because that's what I need. And you got the kids, or you're on your own, whatever that is, like I need this time to do me. So super important, super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I've heard you talk about that as a big one, like stress. Because who isn't stressed?
And it bugs me because so many people tell you when you're trying to get pregnant, and if you are trying to get pregnant, what I'm about to say, but so many people tell you, oh, relax and it will happen, or, oh, stop stressing about it. Stop trying. That'll help you. Just stop trying, and it's so irritating because people don't understand that you should not say that to someone who's struggling with infertility. And so then I feel sometimes like I come along and I'm like, oh, stress is the answer. Stress is what we need to deal with. And it is, but it isn't. Like it is in the way that I'm talking about, and it isn't in the way that those people are talking about. That's
right.
We don't need to worry about like what they're talking about. We'll just leave it at that. So yes, those people are wrong, but I am right.
And you can prove it.
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I had about it. That was an awesome explanation of it all. Like, that was amazing. That was
Cool.
really
Thank you. Yeah. I always feel bad because I can rant about this subject so much. I've had so much personal experience with it that now I feel like I'm almost a therapist on boundaries. It's like, build a wall. No.
That's awesome. Well, we do plan on doing more specific topics for boundaries in our future podcasts. So we will get more in depth and hone in on specific topics. So if anyone is interested in hearing Nicole's thoughts and research on all of that, and mine, we're going to do some later on with children as well. You'll just have to stay tuned for that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
But I think that's it for today. So,
yep. Cool.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
If you'd like to know more about our programs or watch the podcast in video form, you can visit our websites,
where we also share links and resources concerning the different topics that we have discussed.
Check me out at www.nicolehegstead.com.
And check me out at www.bridgetmay.com. See you next time.